What is up, everybody? This is the Crappy Gamer bringing you another top 10 list. And this time it is our top 10 villains of all time, or my top 10 villains of all time. We've already done the top locations / levels, top heroes, and top soundtracks. And I figured now we ought to get around to doing the villains. One of the cool things that I guess it's cool and frustrating depending on how you look at it, when it comes to these lists, is they're not set in stone, because video games are still constantly being made. New villains and heroes and soundtracks and scenes are being made every day. And it's just like with music. You can make a top 100 list of music, but eventually you're going to come across some music that definitely should make your top 100 list. So does that mean that your 100 list that you made is set in stone? It shouldn't be. That's the beautiful thing about games and music and everything in life. There's always the possibility of something even better tomorrow in this kind of realm. And video games is no exception. And actually, one of the people on this list is just was just recently introduced to me within the last 2 months. So we've got some people on here that have been with me for at least a quarter of a century, and then we have someone that's been around for a quarter of a year. So anyways, with that in mind, at number 10, as you can see on the screen right now, it looks like he's known by other names too, but I always knew him as Gary. I mean, Gary would be your rival in Pokemon, and for me, Pokemon was Pokemon Blue. I never played Red, but Red would have been that time period, and then Pokemon Yellow. I had both Blue and Yellow. Yellow thanks to the fact that I had the Pokemon edition of the Game Boy. But I think for me, because I guess I would have roughly been around their ages, maybe. I really don't know how old they're supposed to be portrayed as, but it was easy for me to understand and process the idea of having a rival, and the simplicity of their rivalry made it relatable and easy to relate to, and I always appreciated that. It was a good way to start the process of understanding what a rival was, and that was my educational lesson into the idea of a rival, of someone that whether it's hopefully friendly, but anyone you're competing with, in school and sports and whatnot. Gary was kind of the lesson. He was the one that I learned to say, hey, we gotta outdo this guy, especially because of how often you face him. And I loved at the end, after you went through that whole process to get past the was it the Elite League? Was it the Elite League? I don't know, it's been so damn long since I played that game. You still have to play against him at the very end. I thought that was such a cool moment, within the game itself. But that's why Gary is on this list, and that's why he's at number 10. At number 9 is going to be a shocker to a lot of people. A lot of people are probably not going to know who this is. I apologize, a lot of these pictures ended up being small, so we'll just zoom them in a bit. Alicia. I think it's Alicia. It should be Alicia. It was written out in Japanese that way. Pris. I actually could have honestly put all three and been a happy camper, but Alicia is actually the head of the three priest sisters, and they are the main one of the main protagonists. I stress antagonists. I kind of stress antagonists a bit. But she is, like Gary, kind of a rival of Waffle, your main character. And their dynamic was really interesting because she is they call them feline neckos, which is feline in cat, and neko is cat in Japanese. But she grew up with Waffle, who is a dog, but then comes to hate the dog people because she believes that they stole Prairie from her race, and so then there's all kinds of stuff going on there. But she still shows kind of a love interest in him, and so that whole dynamic was really cool. I've known about Tail Concerto, which is the game that they're involved in. She is also in Solato Robo Red the Hunter, which I just finished up not that long ago. It is not available for the public to see. I might end up making that the case, but right now it is not. It was part of the Anna Special Series because it is the spiritual successor to Tail Concerto, which was the first Anna Special Series. But I've known about Tail Concerto for probably about 20-ish years or so, but never actually fully played the game, let alone beat it and everything like that. And so to finally have a chance to do it thanks to emulators, I got to understand the whole story, not only of the game itself, but the relationship between the two of them. And I'm really into those villains that end up having a kind of humanistic and sort of humbling kind of background, and she ends up having that one. It's really enjoyable, and so that's why. Plus, she also just happens to have the name, the first name of my best friend, so I have to include that as well. But that's why she is number 9 on my personal list of top 10 villains. At number 8 is Zeus, the man on the left. The man on the right is the hero, more or less, of that series. Kratos. This is God of War. We don't know which God of War this is. I don't think it's 3. They're fighting. Oh no, they're fighting over Pandora's the flame. Pandora's. This probably is 3 actually, with everything crumbling around it. Zeus initially kind of has a bland supportive role in the first game, becomes a bit more involved in the second one, and then ends up becoming the villain that we try to defeat in the third one. There's a kind of arrogance that's really easy for most people to not like, and that's what makes him such a great villain. A couple of the villains on this one are similar to that, but there's a scene, or there's a sequence at the end when you battle him, when you essentially have to finish off the battle. That is, if you invest your emotions into Kratos' emotion, that last bit with the shoulder buttons, I'll just say that much. It was such a fun sequence. But yeah, I don't know. There was just something about how high and mighty they made Zeus that I thought it was a great job, because it really invested your sense of wanting to take him down and go along with what Kratos was doing and everything like that. And so I thought they did a great job with Zeus in that situation. So Zeus from God of War, in particular God of War 3, is my number 8. At number 7, this whole game could have literally been the villain, but she goes by the Lady in Red. She is essentially, she's the main main antagonist, not protagonist. There's a bunch of protagonists in this game that you control, but she is from Incredible Crisis, which is one of the most insanely physically taxing games. it's hard. It's very hard, but it's just physically demanding on your body. In particular, the very last mini game you have to do is not fun. I've done it twice in my lifetime, and both times sucked. But I was able to do it, so fuck you, Incredible Crisis. But this lady is kind of weaves herself into. I want to say she's in 3 out of the 4 characters. I don't think she's in the Sun's arc, but I could be wrong. But she ends up becoming essentially one of the main antagonists in the game. And every time you saw her, once you realized she was bad news, like, you just dreaded it because you knew it was going to be a pain in the ass. But the fact that she's in control of the thing you have to run away from in the final minigame, and how excruciatingly painful that minigame is, just makes me want to hate her even more. Even though you essentially, depending on which version of the game you're playing, you kind of have a sexual encounter, or at the very least a sensual massage with her. But there's a lot of ups and downs, but she's that kind of person where, and this goes both ways for women or men, but she's that kind of person that knows she is an attractive woman and utilizes that. And I myself, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced those kind of people and have been manipulated by those kind of people, and it's really easy to dislike those kind of people. So that's why she's my number 7 on my list. At number 6 is Alex Mercer from Prototype and Prototype 2. Now, in Prototype, he is actually the protagonist. He is the man that you're in control of. And he was awesome. I mean, he's an Alex, I'm an Alex, so I'm cool with that. But in the second one, he is a total prat. And they did such a great job of making him kind of it was hard to understand if we really wanted to trust him or not. Especially, you can always make a character seem black and white when it comes to their ambitions and that's not the word I'm thinking of. What am I thinking? What is the word? Intentions. But because you played as Alex Mercer in the first game, there's that sort of embedded bias that, we used him and we tried to topple, what was going on and blah 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 blah. Well, obviously, by him being on the list, he ends up becoming the main villain, and I don't know. Everything about the way that was set up was awesome, and the whole 180 change in his personality was just pretty sweet. Plus, he's such a badass fucking character. Both him, I can't even remember the name of the guy that Sergeant something, but the gentleman you take control of in the second one. Just the idea that they can morph their bodies to make weapons and fly and run up walls. I mean, those games were awesome. Those games were so much fun. But Alex Mercer, that change from protagonist to antagonist, I thought was just really, really cool. And so that's why he's my number 6 on my list. At number 5 is Joseph Seed. Now, I mentioned earlier the idea that someone with that kind of arrogance and hubris, they're really easy to hate. Joseph Seed fits that. He has that. He's based around certain religious cult figures. Jim Jones. Not Timothy. No, not him. I can't remember the name of the Waco guy. Someone will yell about it in the comments maybe. But anyways, he has that oozing charm, but that irritating kind of self-confidence that if you're not swayed by that charm, can really be off-putting. And so that made for him to just be a great character that you just really disliked. Like in Far Cry 5, I really disliked him. But when you play the DLC, or I guess it's a DLC, but it was technically a second game, like it was a sequel or whatnot. He gets humbled, and I don't know, there was something about that humbling that made me sympathize with him a bit, because of how he was humbled. And I think that made him a much more complicated villain. Far Cry is not notorious, but is legendary for making incredible villains. Between Pagan Min and oh man, what he used to be on my list. Voss. Is it Voss? But they've always had great villains, iconic villains, and part of that is because they have great voice acting. I mean, Pagan Min was freaking Troy Baker, so you could make a terrible character and Troy Baker's still going to make him legendary. In fact, Troy Baker is actually on this list with another villain coming up, so hint there. I swear most people are actually going to know who I'm talking about down the line. But yeah, that humbling really made me appreciate Joseph Seed outside of being a villain, but as a human being, which is sometimes hard to do with villains because you only have that one-track mindset. But a lot of these villains for the most part are, not necessarily maybe people, but they're forces within the game itself. And having a kind of backstory always helps when it comes to making deep and complex characters. Anyways, at number 4 is my earliest nemesis, and that is Bowser, and in particular this particular Bowser. Super Mario World, probably the first true game I ever really got into, played pretty much all the way through, never 100%ed it, but played it all the way through, got to the secret areas, did the secret areas like 20 years later, which is pretty amazing with this game, that I finally got around to the secret areas and was able to do those. But this is the first boss fight that, boy, when I beat it, it was an accomplishment. It's probably my first major video game accomplishment was doing this boss fight. Nowadays, it's easy. I mean, it's a simple one to do. Kind of tedious, but it's easy to do. But at that time, that was a big deal to finally beat this guy. And I haven't played a whole lot of Mario games since, because I ended up branching into the Sony and in their PlayStations. But recently I've played the original Super Mario, All Night Nippon, The Lost Levels, Super Mario 3. I'm going to try to work on doing Super Mario 64, such and such and such. But Bowser is always going to be my first rival, so a lot of this is nostalgia. But Bowser's a pretty, interesting, albeit comical in a lot of ways, villain character, and it goes along with the whole realm of the Super Mario Brothers series. But just because he was the first, big villain for me, he has to be on this list, and that's why he's at number 4. And number 3 is actually a cluster of folks. That is the Colossi. Now, if you don't know who these folks are, there we go. This is from one of the most insanely beautiful, somewhat frustrating, very, very, uncomfortably isolating at times, and just wonderfully made games of all time, and that is Shadow of the Colossi, or Shadow of the Colossus, but it should be Shadow of the Colossi. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to take a quick swig. By the way, it is the anniversary of my cat's passing. He passed away in, I want to say 2016. So it has been 5 years now. So, Requiesca in pace, says Har. Although I guess I should say Caesar if I'm going to use Latin. In Shadow of the Colossus, see, I want to say Colossi. I think that sounds better, but you are a character known as the Wanderer, and what makes this game amazing, and I could talk about this all day, and I will when I do my top 100 list, this will definitely be on there, is the only people you fight in the entire game is all the folks you see right here on the screen. Now, in the lower left corner, that little spittoon is you, the Wanderer. And every single silhouette you're seeing is every single one of the Colossi you'll face. No joke. They are that big. Basically, every single boss is a puzzle. Because the idea is you need to get on top of every single... Well, they have individual weak points. Usually it's the head. Some of them it's on certain joints. I think one of them has one on a butt. The stupidly large one at the very top has air sacs, which you can kind of see on the bottom. But you have to find these weak points and stab them. But you also have to hang on to the damn things as they're whipping around, and you only have a certain amount of grip gauge before you have to let go and try to recover. And if you let go and you're not in a stable situation, you can get thrown off, and then you have all kinds of issues. But that's it. Those are the only people you fight. Are these, was it 16? 16 basically bosses. You literally just fight 16 bosses the whole game. And getting to every one of the bosses is a really sombering, like I said, isolating kind of moment of reflection as you're getting ready to tackle whatever you think is going to be the next one you have to go up against. And if you haven't played it before and not knowing what you're going to run into, it's pretty emotional and pretty memorable. The music is fantastic. The graphics, even the PS2 version was gorgeous, but there's actually a PS3 remake, and then I believe there's a PS4 remake now, which is probably going to be gorgeous. I think I played the PS3 but not the PS4. But it's just a gorgeous game. It's an experience. It's worth playing. It's a bit frustrating. Excuse me. But it's awesome. It's an emotional journey and totally worth checking out. And these 16 bosses are, what make it. And they don't talk. They're just they're kind of there. But it's awesome. Awesome. So anyways, that's my number 3. And number 2 is Arden Ezunia, or as he really should be known, Arden Lucius Callum. And he is the one that just found out about like 2 months ago. Never played the Final Fantasy series, believe it or not. I played a demo of Final Fantasy VII and didn't like it because I'm not into that turn-based kind of fighting. But then I heard that the latter ones don't utilize that. It's real time and you're running around and whatnot, but you can work together with your the folks in your party. So just happened to run across someone that had Final Fantasy 15, bought it, and then I think I had it for like 8 months before I finally got around to playing it, and finally did, and was blown away. Not only by of course it helps that some of the greatest voice actors in the world right now are in this game, but the food that Ignis makes looks gorgeous. They did such a good job with the graphics on the food. Every member of your party is easy to develop a relationship with. Many of the characters you meet, it's easy to develop a relationship with, but the villain in particular, which is this man right here, boy, you go through a lot of emotions. You can kind of tell he's a sketchy dude, but there's like, I don't know, at one point you're like, oh, maybe he is, not a bad guy, but maybe he's a pretty neutral dude in the end. And then there's going to probably be some reason why he's helping us, and maybe because he's supposed to be part of the, essentially empire you're going up against, but also maybe he wants to take them down, and maybe there's a reason for it. And then he ends up, legitimately becoming the main bad guy of the whole game. But then you get a chance to actually play his backstory, and I actually was kind of disappointed. I wanted more info out of his backstory. I thought they could have done better with that, but as a whole, super complex character, super well voiced. The kind of suave, devil-may-care kind of like voice acting that was done was amazing. It fit him perfectly, and he just, I don't know, he was just such a cool individual to get to watch his, especially with the DLC, watching kind of his rise up again, and then fall again. So that's why Arden is my number 2. And at number 1, if you all guessed it by now, it is a Troy Baker. At one point, he is not, believe it or not, as amazing as he is, the voice actor I most associate this character with. That would be Patrick Zimmerman, but Josh Keaton also did a great job with the younger version of him, and that is Revolver Ocelot. Now, if you played the Metal Gear series, more or less in its entirety, especially the games that matter most, which in my opinion, in order, would be Metal Gear 3, Ground Zero, 5, Solid, 2, Sons of Liberty, and then Patriots. You could play the other ones in between, but if you play those ones, you'll get the full feel. Plus, those are the best ones in my opinion. In particular, right here, what you're looking at is perfect. I actually didn't even realize this picture had that. On the left is young Revolver Ocelot from Metal Gear 3. That it was Josh Keaton voice acted it. The gentleman in the middle is Revolver Ocelot in the 80s. So this is 60s Ocelot, 80s Ocelot with Troy Baker. And then on the far right is 2010s, I guess. Technically it's Liquid Ocelot, but that's Revolver Ocelot, still being done by Patrick Zimmerman, who ended up doing him, I think, the most. He did him in Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear 2, and then Metal Gear 4. But initially, when I first played Metal Gear Solid, I did not think highly of Revolver. He's the first boss you fight, and you do see him, quite a bit throughout the game, and you can tell he's a bit of a schemer. That's not true, because you do get tortured by him. I've read about that, but I just didn't see him as being anything of significance after the first game. And then obviously he made a return in Metal Gear 2, and then it was like, okay, maybe this guy's got some legs behind him as being an iconic villain in the series. As soon as you saw him in the original, or not the original, but the earliest game, which would be the Ocelot on the left, it was like, oh, I gotcha. And that Ocelot on the left is technically, he's a villain, but he's kind of a on again, off again ally. He's a respected rival. In the middle, he's actually an ally, but there's a lot of reasoning behind that. But he's an ally, and then on the far right, he would be the final protagonist of the game. And there's just so much. There's so many layers within this character. Being that originally he's technically a spy, then a double spy, then a triple spy, and I think at one point he might have been a quadruple spy. His heritage, who he was born from, all the things he's gone through in his career, and the fact that he has been the basically eternal rival of one of the most iconic characters in my world, but definitely in the world of video games. I have to put him here. And the final fight with him in Metal Gear 4, which, like I said, I'm going to probably do a whole damn episode on some of the things that Hideo Kojima, who's one of the greatest, some of the greatest games of all time came through him, but there's a lot of mistakes he did, especially with the Metal Gear series. That was one of them. That should have been the final thing that we as Metal Gear, because as far as we can tell, we're not going to see any more Metal Gear games. That should have been it. But instead, that ended up not being the last thing. We ended up having a couple more games afterwards. But that final sequence, that final fight, was one of the most emotional moments of my life as a video game player, for a number of reasons. That whole game was emotional for a lot of reasons, which I'll talk about in another episode. But anyways, for me, the number one villain of all time on my list has got to be Revolver Ocelot. And I'm going to leave it with the thing that he said the most. It was his catchphrase. And that is, "You're pretty good." Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.